open the meeting. Okay, we are live. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Lunenburg Select Board meeting of Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. In accordance with the requirement of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent its spread. All town facilities are open, but by appointment only. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. This meeting will be broadcast through local access cable on YouTube Live and can be viewed at the following link at youtube.com/c/LunenburgAccess/live. And you will be able to find it on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting has completed. If you would like to participate in this meeting and you have a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer, you can join the meeting using the Zoom application, and the webinar ID for this meeting is 909-174-0347. If you would like to participate but don't have a smart device, you can use the telephone and call 888-475-4499. And again, the webinar ID again is 909-174-0347. If you are on the Zoom application and you would like to speak, please acquaint yourself with the raise your hand feature of the application. It is in different places, depending if you're on an iPad or a computer or a telephone. If you are using a regular telephone and wish to speak, dial *9, and that would do the equivalent of raising your hand. And the chair will call on you when it is appropriate to get input from other speakers. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Before I continue, I just want to close my office door here. Okay, thank you. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Adams to lead us with her flag in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so happy Groundhog's Day, everyone. I heard that the groundhogs are at shadow, so we're going to get more winter, as if you didn't already know that looking out your window. Hopefully everybody got their dose of Sonny and Cher today as well. And hope everybody is staying warm and staying safe and watching themselves on the road. I heard it was pretty treacherous last night. Much better. The roads look pretty fine today. So I want a big shout out to the DPW for doing a fine job in plowing all the roads of Lunenburg, as well as the state for the state roads that they plow. Any public comment from the board to start off this evening? No. Any public comment from the public? Also no. Any announcements, Madam Town Manager?
Just the same announcement about the outreach meeting this Thursday, the information regarding the Zoom invitation and the passcode is on the website as well as on the town calendar. And that will be for the public to comment on and provide feedback on the adult retail marijuana establishment proposed at 88 Mass Ave.
Thank you. And I have no other announcements beside that one as well. Our 705, which was with Smokestack Roasters has been delayed because the proprietors of Smokestack Roasters, their location has no power, no internet, no Zoom meeting. So they will be rescheduling that. Just another sign of our times. So we will put them back on as my guess is they'll probably be on next week. We have a meeting at 7:30, an appointment at 7:30 with our town council and with members of the Conservation Commission, who I see have joined us, some of them. So let's go. Do we have any interviews, appointments, reappointments, or resignations, Madam Town Manager?
None.
Okay. Well, let's jump right into your report and the COVID-19 report.
Okay, we'll do the COVID-19 update first. And start with the Board of Health, their weekly updates. So I'll provide the last 2 weeks because we didn't have a meeting.
Before you continue, I just want to let people who are in the meeting know that, again, it's being reported that we have no cable broadcast. So I'm sure PAC is looking into it, but we are recording the Zoom meeting, so it's not going out live, the meeting again, at least not currently. I'm sorry for the interruption, Madam Town Manager.
Certainly. So the confirmed number of cases reported to town as of January 22nd was 519 and 1 death. The state report showed 495 positive cases as of January 19th. For that week period, that was an increase of 45 cases. The confirmed number of cases reported to town as of January 29th, 1 week later, was 546 cases and 1 death. And the state report showed 523 cases as of January 26th. And this was an increase of 27 cases from the previous week. An update on vaccination clinic for residents aged 75 years and older. Tomorrow, the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health will be running a vaccination clinic in Devens for residents in the member communities that are 75 and older. They had a very limited supply of vaccines available for this clinic, and the Eagle House Senior Community Center helped schedule these appointments for the 16 available slots for Lunenburg residents. There is currently a waiting list of 49 people for the next available clinic. The Neshoba Associated Boards of Health has a limited amount of COVID-19 vaccines, and the Eagle House Senior Community Center staff will continue taking names and phone numbers of Lunenburg residents aged 75 and older to be placed on a waiting list. Neshoba Associated Boards of Health will be trying to run weekly clinics as vaccines become available in our area. Clinics will be held at a central location for all towns that come under the umbrella of the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health. Lunenburg residents that are ages 75 and older can get on the waiting list being administered by the Eagle House staff by calling 978-582-4166. As appointment registration slots become available for Lunenburg residents age 75 and older, these appointments will be done through the staff at the Eagle House. The appointment process is set up as a first come, first served system. The staff member will call the resident and the registration process will be done over the phone with them. In the meantime, they ask that you please continue to go to the mass.gov site to try and schedule an appointment through the vaccination locations on the website. Eagle House staff will not be taking names of those under 75 until they are contacted by the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health. Today, the governor's office provided municipalities with a temporary constituent services resource to assist with COVID vaccine registrations for seniors 75 and older who do not have access to the internet. This will allow our senior center staff to submit intake forms with the senior's contact information so that a live person can call the senior back to register them over the phone. This is a temporary measure until a public access phone goes live by the end of the week. And I had notified the board over the course of the last week as the registration process became available for this age category. There were many frustrated residents contacting our senior center and across the state from what I read and have heard from other towns. I reached out to our delegation. They responded immediately, and within a day, they had signed on to a letter to the governor to address the situation. So I rollout of a live phone, which will address the internet access phone. It sounds forthcoming by the end of this week. A regional discussion on vaccination rollout plan. The town administrators and town managers within the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health District held a meeting today to discuss how we can work together to create a super site in our region and collaborate with the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health and our legislators for creating the site. We all realize that the real issue here is a lack of supply of vaccines and the limited amount of board of health and our own Neshoba Associated Boards of Health are allocated. However, having a plan in place for the entirety of the vaccination rollout would be instrumental as we hope the supply increases as we go forward. So I'll keep the board updated on that. We have tentatively scheduled a meeting for next week to include our health agent from Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, as well as our legislators from all the member communities. So there be a good representation from all of our delegation. Updates from the state and federal government. The numbers from Massachusetts as of January 28th, there were 488,861 cases, 14,056 deaths, and 13,309,441 patients have been tested to date. And that's all I have for the COVID-19 updates. I'll move on to my regular update report. Announcement on existing vacancies. There is one vacancy on the Architectural Preservation District Commission, 4 vacancies on the Bylaw Review Committee, 1 vacancy on the Cultural Council, 1 vacancy on the TCP Building Design Committee, 1 vacancy on the Historical Commission, 1 vacancy on the Senior Work-Off Program Committee, and 1 associate vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Interested people can find the appointment application on the website and complete the application and either email it or send it via mail to the Select Board's office. An update on invitation for bids and request for proposals. The cleaning services bid that was due January 20th. We decided to reject all the bids that were received because there were a number of inconsistencies in the bid results. So the assistant town manager revised the bid package and has re-advertised it, and bids are now due on February 18th. The assistant town manager has also been working on the solid waste disposal and recycling request for proposals. And we were notified recently that Casella will not be submitting a proposal when this goes out to bid, as this is an area that they do not wish to work in because they haul all their materials to Auburn. An update, an announcement from Maya, who is our health insurance carrier. They announced at the annual MMA meeting that they will be providing a 100% reduction in premiums for 1 month in the fiscal year of 22. And they'll be making further announcements at a later date, whether this will be for the month of July or another month within the fiscal year. This is a significant savings for both the town and school budgets and for employees with health insurance through the town. The holiday premium for 1 full month in fiscal 22 will result in the following savings: between $233,000 and $240,000 savings for active plans for health insurance for school personnel, between $59,000 and $60,000 in savings for active plans for health insurance for town personnel, approximately $17,000 in savings for town retiree health insurance plans, and approximately $32,000 in savings for school retiree health insurance plans. So very good news on that end.
Excellent, yes.
Updates from the various departments. The assessors, the first motor vehicle excise commitment will be sent out on February 12th. And the contractor that handles the assessments for industrial and commercial properties is out doing those inspections, and the principal assessor expects some new growth from these inspections. From the Council on Aging, as I noted earlier, the senior center staff has been inundated with calls requesting information and assistance with the vaccine registration. So they're helping as best they can with all the calls they're getting and with the registration process. Senior Center has been doing bingo, book club, and coffee shop via Zoom, and we'll be doing a memory cafe through Zoom shortly as well. The center continues to run the grab and go drive-through events, including giving out emergency kits and a take-home tea party. The director said they will do a soft opening as the numbers decline with 10 or less people at events such as bingo and the grief support group. From the police chief, he reported that they have ordered the body-worn cameras and those will be implemented in the next 1 to 2 months. One of the cruises is now on the road, new cruises is now on the road, and the ACO vehicle has been received and is currently being outfitted. From the IT director, he reported that our remote meeting coordinator has worked on a website project to update the business directory, and that is now complete, and it full with pictures and links to those businesses that had signed up that they wanted their information on our website. The IT director has been corresponding a lot recently with the TCP building committee architect and on the networking pieces and the IT system information related to the design of that proposed project. From the public access cable manager, she reported that they have had issues with broadcasting the Zoom meetings, and they do not believe that it is an internet issue, but believe it is related to the Castus server. So I'll report to her after tonight's meeting as well that there was another issue tonight. The cable manager also reported she has been corresponding a lot with the TCP building committee architect on cable equipment and related issues for that proposed project. The fire chief reported that the ambulance that was hit by a driver weeks ago will be back in-house, and the fire engine that had electrical issues will be back in 1 to 2 weeks. The land use director reported that the planning board is working on the rules and regulations for subdivisions. And the treasurer collector reported that there are currently 66 properties in tax title as of January 25th. Sorry, it's cut off, which is much higher than normally it is in previous years. And so these delinquent notices will be sent out, and this provides taxpayers 14 days to pay, and then a notice of taking is done after that for any outstanding amount that is not paid. The 2020 tax titles would be recorded by the month of March, and the collector treasurer also reported that there are a number of personal property taxes that are delinquent, and the online permitting system has been very useful tool in this respect between the departments to so everyone's updated on outstanding taxes. The third quarter real estate taxes were due February 1st, and this was moved to February 2nd because of the closure of town offices on yesterday's storm. The DPW director and the town manager attended a pre-construction meeting for the Pleasant Street Bridge project on January 15th. The engineers for the design of the Flat Hill Culvert are ramping up their design work in order to finish design by the springtime. And separately, the Flat Hill road drainage issue areas are currently being surveyed and the field work has been completed. McCarty Engineering will be doing the survey work for the ADA project at the North Cemetery parking lot, and the construction part of this project will occur in the spring. The Monty Tech students have been moving along on the garage project at the North Cemetery. And the DPW director is currently looking at possible culverts that would be eligible under a DER grant, which must, those projects must have an ecological impact. He reported that the fuel tank installation is on schedule to be complete by February 5th. From the finance director has been reviewing revenues on a monthly basis. And as of December 31st, we were 3% higher in overall revenues compared to the same quarter in fiscal year 20. Departments are spending on target with their budgets, and snow removal expenditures are looking good. The town clerk reported that the town census forms have been sent out and are coming in slowly. And the town clerk also stated that she is not sure if there will be a town caucus this year, but announced that nomination papers are available. In other meetings, events, and announcements, the Conservation Commission has a meeting on Zoom Wednesday, February 3rd at 7 p.m. The Sewer Commission has a meeting on Zoom Thursday, February 4th at 5 p.m. And as I stated earlier, the community outreach meeting on the proposed adult retail marijuana establishment at 88 Mass Ave is on Zoom on Thursday, February 4th at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Does anybody have any questions for the town manager on anything in the COVID report or her town manager report?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Mr. Jeffries.
I just have a couple of questions. So you noted that the fuel tanks are going to be going live on the 5th. Excuse me. Have we developed yet an emergency response plan in the event of a catastrophic event at the pumps and the overground tanks?
I would have to ask both the fire chief, the emergency management director, and the DPW director.
Okay. Well, my
Just to be-
follow-up.
Just to be clear, her report did not say they were going live. She said that the installation was scheduled to be complete.
Thank you. And then the second part of that was also, if there is a policy, I would assume then that there's a policy or training material for the operation of the new pumps, and that contains information on how to activate the emergency response plan, so that any user knows what to do. But I'm guessing that you'll need to get back to me on that one too.
Yeah, and I'm sure the DPW director can answer that.
Thank you. And I apologize for not bringing that up during our pre-meeting discussion. I forgot to raise that issue, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the town manager? Okay, seeing none. Old business, so discussion on the fiscal year 2022 budget, the capital plan, the financial forecast, and the annual town meeting warrant articles. Now, the town manager has provided the current town meeting warrant articles, draft articles in our Google Drive, so all the selectmen should be able to review that. And does anybody have any questions about any of those topics that we talked about here that I mentioned? The budget, capital plan, financial forecast, or the annual town meeting warrant? Ms. Adams? Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I can't find my virtual hand either. My Zoom setup's a little different tonight. I read through the proposed articles, and J and K, I believe, read exactly the same. And I didn't know what their difference will be. They have to do with free cash, but they were exactly the same wording.
J is the regular stabilization fund, and
Oh,
K
okay.
is special purpose stabilization.
Oh, okay. I was scanning through them, and everything's very generic right now, and it felt like they were similar. So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Approval of minutes of December 15th, 2020. Everybody should have had those to review. If there are no proposed changes, I would entertain a motion regarding the minutes of December 15th, 2020 as submitted.
I move to approve the minutes for December the 15th.
Do I have
Second.
a second? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote. Ms. Adams,
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer,
Aye.
Mr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries,
Aye.
and an aye from me. Okay, continuing along, we still have 5 minutes till our meeting. This is good. So warrants, last Monday, I signed the warrants, the following warrants: an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $1,752,186.13. A payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $198,022.53. And a payroll warrant in the amount of $831,942.44. Any action items? No action items. Any committee reports? Ms. Adams?
I would just mention, not quite a committee report, but in terms of being the liaison for the folks from Monty Tech who are going to be working on some design for the old primary location, possible town green sketches and such. The name of the teacher is Jesse. He came with 2 students. I walked the property with them on Friday so that they could visualize that of which they're working on, and showed them School Street, that Verizon and the Historical Society are private properties. The students seemed very excited to have the opportunity to work on the project, and they asked for any relevant information on the site, like the parking easement information, and Heather emailed them the requested information. And I think it was Friday. It was 9 degrees out. I think we have a history there now. I think it was snow on. Was there snow there when we walked on Halloween? I think so.
Halloween, yeah, absolutely.
Super cold the other day, but it seemed like they were really happy to have the chance to work on it. And I think it'll be exciting to have some visual examples of how we could potentially use that space. So that was this past Friday. And we'll see what they come up with and if they need anything else from us.
Excellent. Any other committee reports?
Yes,
Mr. Jeffries?
I have 2 committee reports tonight. The first is the library trustees. The library trustees had a meeting after our last meeting. It was the end of January. So a couple good things. The Beanstalk Winter Reading Program is about halfway done. And there have been more than 30,000 minutes logged. So this is a program that engages young people to develop great reading skills and habits at a young age, so that way they can carry that throughout their life. And this was funded, the materials for this was funded through the Friends of the Library. They also purchased a camera so that way they can be able to record in-house virtual content. Currently, their staff are using their own, cell phones and the like for that. So that's a really good thing. And then in the fall, they created a strategic plan subcommittee. And this is to develop a 3-year plan that contains multi-year goals and objectives. And then once it's developed, it's a source document to help secure grant funding for library technology programs and also for different building needs. For TCP Design Committee, this one's a little bit longer. So we met with the architect to receive some cost estimates. So due to the levels of lead in the water, we also were looking as part of that process, it was also the final engineering analysis as well that we were waiting for. So due to the levels of lead that are been detected in the water of the building, the entire plumbing system is being recommended by the engineers for replacement. Although the boilers are in good working condition, the heat delivery system, the ductwork, the radiators, etc., are not. Also, there's current air circulation requirements that would have to be met. So all that system would need to be upgraded. So there's significant HVAC work is required. A new roof is going to be needed. And so to improve the critical systems, there's going to need to be significant ceiling and wall work. And that in Massachusetts it's gonna affect more than 50% of the building, which then triggers a level 3 type of construction project. So with a level 3 project, there are a host of additional building requirements that come with being able to rehab the space. There's seismic structural needs that have to be addressed, and all fire safety equipment has to be upgraded to meet the current code. So this requires the roof to be reinforced with steel and anchored into the ground, as well as, requiring, like, the life safety systems, sprinklers, also just in general, the fire alarm system. So the estimate that we received was for 16 million, but when you add in the contingency, the contract supervision, the escalation cost, the contractor overhead, we received an overall estimate of $21 million. Members were all, shall I say, surprised by this amount. Certainly the additional 3 to 4 million at a minimum that is necessary by the level 3 trigger. To note, this trigger will be in place for any future use of that building. It's reasonable to assume that those costs are not something that we can mitigate due to the reason why is related to the air circulation requirements, again, related to the plumbing, et cetera. So throughout the process, there was a couple things, the board considered many different cost-cutting measures, minimizing the amount of walls that would be moved every time you touch a wall. There's additional costs that come with that. Keeping all existing door openings, that way that helps decrease additional masonry work. Maximize shared spaces such as conference rooms. We're also planning to build a commercial kitchen, but not purchase the equipment for the commercial kitchen. So that way that allows, future town meeting and the town to find other ways to source that, such as through donations. You can buy things secondhand. We also don't have any plan to purchase any kind of office furniture. There's planned storage space that could later be converted to office space. There is some unfinished, relatively unfinished space in the room. And then using cost estimates, our cost estimates use economic furnishing material. So there are, no plans for marble floors or, golden faucets. And then also the understanding that PAC will pay for their own space. So talking with the architects, where we left off was at a couple different measures to help bring this cost down, looking at removing some of the walkways that hug the current building that aren't needed for egress or for ADA compliance. Currently, the project has been phased to be occupied during construction. So looking at changing the phasing so that way the building would not be occupied, and seeing how that affects the cost, decrease construction time, should equal less money. And then we also asked the architects to provide us with ideas for how they can recommend to bring this cost down. We have another meeting scheduled at toward the end of May, toward the end of the month. I believe it's on the 17th, and I will have more information for you after that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. I will just say the Capital Planning Committee met tonight, and we will be planning in March to review, at the request of our committee and request of the Finance Committee, reviewing the Selectmen's financial policies and how it pertains to the capital planning process, and come up with any recommendations for any modifications, additions, changes, removals, etc. That will be in March. So that will be an ongoing process. Any changes we hope to be submitted to the Finance Committee and eventually to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, sorry, that will hope to be in force by next capital planning season, which will be next fall. Okay, let's go back to 7:30 appointment, a meeting with Town Council. I am going to unmute Town Council. And the regarding discussion of carrying firearms on town property and hunting on conservation land. So I will unmute Mr. Pease and Mr. Bursch, who are on the Conservation Commission too, just anticipation of them participating in this. Mr. Costa, can you hear us?
I can, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pease
Yeah, I can hear you.
and Mr. Bursch.
I can hear you fine. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. So everybody should have received the town council opinion regarding the right to possess firearms that are on town-owned property. Did everybody from the Conservation Commission and the board receive that?
Yes.
Uh, Maybe it would be best if, Mr. Costa, if you would summarize for us, I mean, not reading the whole opinion, but just summarize what your findings are, and then we'll just start that as a basis for the discussion.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Select Board. So, as was stated, I authored an opinion on January 22nd addressing this question about the right to possess firearms on town-owned property. And the way that the question was presented to me, and I heard it a number of times from a number of different people, got this question from a couple of town representatives or volunteers during my office hours. Was also asked a question by Heather Lemieux, because I understand that it was something that had been addressed at a select board meeting. And so the consequence of those questions was this opinion. And I tried to be sort of comprehensive in presenting an opinion that maybe went a bit above and beyond the specific question that was asked, but I wanted to provide a bit of context. And so the opinion itself was 3 pages long, but you can see in the opinion that I've sort of begun by addressing this concept of municipal gun control authority generally, and what's referred to as preemption. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that term, but I wanted to just sort of set the stage for the relationship between the federal governmental controls, the state governmental controls, and then the authority that a municipality has with respect to the regulation of firearms, because that is something that can be confusing to some, and frankly, understandably so, because most of us are aware of Second Amendment rights. Some of us are aware of the Massachusetts licensing scheme that exists for firearms. But then, of course, this question arises, well, what can municipalities do above and beyond that? Do the municipalities have any authority? And the short answer to that question is yes, that this question has been litigated, not in the exact context that it arises in Lunenburg, but it's been litigated in similar contexts. And the courts have said that yes, municipalities have the authority to regulate firearms, the use of firearms, the possession of firearms, provided that regulation is not inconsistent with, does not conflict with, certainly Second Amendment rights, but more specifically the regulatory scheme that exists, the licensing scheme, maybe I should say, that exists in Massachusetts for applying for obtaining a license to carry. And of course, one thing I shouldn't omit, particularly with the former police chief on your board, is that public safety officials, police officers in particular, there are federal laws that govern their ability, of course, to carry firearms and other weapons, regardless of what property they may be on, whether it be private or public property, in the interest of performing their duties. So the first couple of pages of my opinion really provides that general guidance, but then I really get to the question that was asked by Ms. Lemieux, which is, well, what about the relationship between that authority that a municipality has and public property that happens to be in the care, custody, and control of a specific board or commission or committee? What is the interplay between, what's the relationship between the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, I should say, and the Conservation Commission, or the Select Board and the Recreation and Parks Commission? What's that relationship? And the answer is that it's complex, because on the one hand, while it's very clear that select boards have the authority, as I indicated before, to regulate and to propose bylaws, for example, that would be adopted through town meeting, to adopt lesser regulation in the form of policies that could address things like firearms discharge. And in fact, you've done that in Lunenburg. You have a law on the books in the form of a bylaw that prohibits the discharge of firearms on certain public property without permission from the select board. while you have that authority, you do have to sort of look at, in the context of property that is not held by the town for general municipal purposes, and therefore within the purview of the Board of Selectmen, what authority do individual boards or commissions, like the Conservation Commission, for example, have to regulate, to govern their own property? And that authority is significant. I liken it to the authority that I might have as a private property owner. You can adopt townwide regulation on the one hand, but just because you sort of set the stage in terms of what may or may not be permitted, doesn't mean that on my private property, I can't adopt a more stringent standard. There may be nothing on the books that says that an individual can't discharge a firearm in the town in any town USA. But if on my private property, I'm uncomfortable with an individual entering and discharging that weapon, if that property is within my control, I can prohibit that action from occurring. And so I will use that analogy to sort of compare the authority of the select board to the authority of the Conservation Commission, for example. The Conservation Commission can adopt rules and regulations by statute with respect to property that is owned by the commission, that has been entrusted to their care, custody, and control by a vote of town meeting. And they can regulate what can be done on that property. Certainly, the select board has the authority on a townwide basis to adopt more stringent regulation. But to the extent that that more stringent regulation doesn't exist, it's the authority of the Conservation Commission to determine how their property gets used. And I would say that the Conservation Commission is probably the most extreme example, because they have statutory authority to own property. They have statutory authority to adopt rules and regulations that govern the use and the management of that property. Other boards and commissions and committees don't necessarily have that same power. They don't necessarily have the same enabling legislation. So the other example that I gave on the last page of my opinion was this example of the Board of Park Commissioners, because I understand that this question has arisen in that context as well, and there is property that is within that board's care, custody, and control in Lunenburg. What authority do they have to manage their property? And on the one hand, I think that authority is the same as a matter of common law. But on the other hand, you have to look to other sources, because there is no statute as explicit as the Conservation Commission's enabling legislation. You have to look to the town charter, you have to look to the town bylaws and say, is there anything here that conflicts? And there are some challenges in Lunenburg, because you look to the bylaws, you look to the charter specifically, and the charter, and we've had this conversation before in other contexts, the charter creates this dichotomy, and it's not unique to the Board of Park Commissioners, but this dichotomy between the policymaking authority and powers of an elected or even an appointed board and the day-to-day responsibilities of staff, specifically in many instances, the town manager. And so I gave the example that in section 3-9B of the town charter, you've got this provision that gives the park commissioners the authority to make rules for the use and government of property that's within their control. But then similarly, elsewhere in the charter, section 4-2I, you've got this provision that says the town manager has full jurisdiction over the rental and use of all town facilities and property, except property that's under the control of the school department or the Conservation Commission. So there is this, I don't want to call it a conflict per se, but again, it's that dichotomy between day-to-day versus general policy making. So it becomes a bit more confusing when you go outside the scope of conservation commissions and school department, because of the fact that there is no statutory enabling legislation that creates these powers, and your charter does create sort of split responsibilities between staff and the elected or appointed public bodies. So that might have been even longer than me just reading the memo, the opinion, Mr. Chairman, but I hope that I sort of gave an overall view and provided some context to the opinion. And again, I expect there'll be some questions. I'm certainly happy to do my best to try to answer them.
So I'm going to start out with the first question, which is, given that summary that you just provided and their proposed changes to their land use policy notwithstanding, the current conservation policy that prohibits the possession of firearms on conservation property, is that problematic? Or have they run afoul of any authority by having that as it stands right now, in your opinion?
So in my opinion, they have not. I will caveat that opinion by saying I presume that there would be no attempt on the part of the Conservation Commission to enforce that prohibition on public safety officials, police officers, emergency personnel that might enter onto the property or respond to an emergency. Again, there are federal laws that would preempt any authority that they would have, even as a property owner, even with state legislation giving them the ability to manage their own affairs on their property. There is federal legislation that would preempt those rights. But against the general public, I do believe it is within the authority of the Conservation Commission on property that is within their care, custody, and control to prohibit the possession of firearms.
Okay, thank you. I would open it up to the board or commission members. Again, with raising your hands, I'll have a discussion about this further. Mr. Marino.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Attorney Costa. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're confusing hunting with possession of firearms. I've read a lot of the cases that you've outlined, in particular, Brown versus the town of Carlisle, I guess, was probably a more interesting case with respect to what we're trying to accomplish here. And what you're saying is that the commission prohibiting the possession of firearms on conservation land is not repugnant to the Constitution. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Well, how is that if I have a license to carry a firearm issued by the state and I'm just carrying my firearm? And there's another case I read, a similar case where the mere possession of a firearm on public property, that the bylaw that prohibited that was overturned because of the fact that it's the state legislature already gives you the authority to do that. So how is it that, in other words, there's no violation of somebody's constitutional rights if they're possessing a firearm? Whether they're not hunting, they're just possessing a firearm for their own protection. And that's what that case law speaks to, is self-protection.
Sure. So I think part of the challenge here is that you hit on one thing, which is that much of the case law, not all of it, but much of the case law addresses this issue of firearm possession or even firearm discharge. It addresses it in the context of hunting. And of course, there are laws that specifically address hunting and the right to hunt. And so that's one piece of this. Is that my understanding is that's how this question arose in the context specifically of the Conservation Commission's land use policy and discussions about revising that policy or those rules and regulations. So I appreciate that. There's also this issue of the authority of a party that is in possession, control of a parcel of property, as opposed to the regulatory authority of a municipality. So the case law that you're speaking to is, what authority does a municipality have in adopting a bylaw? Regulatory authority to take certain actions that might be, to use your words, sort of repugnant to law, whether it be state law, federal law, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, the right to self-protection. But then there's this second issue, and I think it's the second issue that we're really addressing here with respect to Conservation Commission property. And that is that this is property that is in the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission. It's no different than my own home, which is in my care, custody, and control, or your own home, which is in your care, custody, and control. The fact that a close friend of mine may have a license to carry that permits him or her to walk the streets or to ride in his or her vehicle with a firearm doesn't necessarily mean that I'm obligated as a property owner to allow that individual onto my property with that firearm. That's my determination when it comes to property that's under my control. Notwithstanding the fact that they may have the right to carry, they may have a license to carry that was rightfully procured through the proper process by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I have no obligation to allow them onto my property with that firearm. That's my choice because that property is in my control. And so this is an issue where the Conservation Commission is saying we have property that's in our care, custody, and control, or at least is potentially saying. They've said it in their existing policy. I understand that that policy is under review. I've reviewed a couple of different versions of a revised policy, so I don't know what lies ahead. But at least to the chairman's question concerning the existing policy that's on the books and that prohibition as it exists, I don't view that as being repugnant to law, because I view it as a regulation that's been adopted by the commission with respect to property that's within its control, and it can decide what is permitted and what is not permitted on that property, not as a matter, not as a matter of bylaw adoption, but as a matter of controlling property that is within its own custody.
Well, I still feel that it's a little bit of an overreach. And I don't even think it's necessary. If you read that bylaw, Carlisle's bylaw, there's nothing in that bylaw that would prohibit you from carrying a firearm. There's plenty that would prohibit you from hunting on certain pieces of town-owned property or private property without permission of the landowner, but nothing about possession. And I think that was a smart idea on their part to stay away from, to not trespass in any constitutional areas, because I just think it leaves, there's too much to interpret there, and it leaves us open to liability. Just my opinion, and I'm probably wrong. I don't know. You deal with it all the time, but I'm not comfortable with it, quite frankly.
If I could, through you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't want to say that I deal with it all the time. I've had occasion to deal with it in the past, and I've litigated a few cases involving firearms licenses. With that said, I don't think you're wrong, because what you're now making is somewhat of a policy argument, and I try and be careful in drawing the lines. It's not my role to dictate policy for the town, whether it be for the select board or the Conservation Commission. I would agree that based upon my experience and based upon even the research I've done in connection with attempting to definitively answer this question for the town, it is not the norm, at least what I found, certainly in bylaws. It is not the norm for there to be a blanket prohibition on the possession of firearms. There are many bylaws, there are many rules, regulations, even policies that address the discharge of firearms on public property. And there are others that regulate, some quite stringently, the ability to hunt, some going into great detail as to what sorts of weapons can be used, and oftentimes prohibiting the use of firearms for hunting and only allowing, for example, bow hunting. So whether that's appropriate, whether it is appropriate to stand clear of this question of possession of firearms, and whether that's a safer approach and that potentially exposes you to lesser liability, or at least the threat of liability, somebody believing that their Second Amendment rights have been trampled upon and opting therefore to sue the town, those are potential reasonable concerns, and as a matter of policy, it may be better to stand clear, but that's sort of above my pay grade, and that's for you as a select board to decide, and I guess ultimately for the Conservation Commission to decide with respect to its policy or its regulation.
Thank you.
Mr. Jeffrey. You have a follow-up, Mr. Marino?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you. So I think that the scenario that I have in mind is someone who has a restraining order out against someone that they're in a relationship with, and has a license to carry and wants to go to the town forest to clear their mind and enjoy the fresh air, with the understanding that the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution makes reference to the right of the people to bear arms not being able to be infringed. So where I see the conflict, and yet we have rules that say that you can't possess a firearm. Where my conflict in all this comes is on as a commission, you know, the Conservation Commission. So anyone who's a member of this board, right? So they follow the same government rules that all of us have to in terms of being government officials of some form. Same open meeting law requirements, You know, they're created by, you know, laws. You know, all their property is funded from taxpayer dollars or donations. Their property is maintained from taxpayer dollars. If they're sued, the suit goes against us as a town. So by all measures, they are a government body, except for, based on this opinion, when it comes to their possession, their care, custody, and control of property. Then when it's under care, the property under their care, custody, and control somehow is more equivalent to private property than it is to government property. But there's no indication that anything about the Conservation Commission is a private entity. I mean, they are an extension of the government. They are a government actor. When they make decisions, they're legally bound, you know, they're binding decisions, they're governmental decisions. So can you better explain to me why there's this differentiation with when it comes to property possession or care, custody, and control of property, why they're treated more like a private homeowner than a government actor?
So through you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not sure, to use your words, that I can necessarily better explain it for you. I can try to explain it maybe somewhat differently. So and maybe I can do it by analogy, because the way that you started your question was sort of similar to the question that Member Marino asked, where he commented on the Second Amendment right to bear arms and the right to protect oneself and one's property. Maybe not in those exact words. And the example you gave is someone that maybe has a restraining order taken out and they want the ability to protect themselves, and they're coming onto public property, but property that's within the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission, and they want to be sure that they can provide that same protection to themselves. I appreciate that, and I'm not in any way speaking against that. I have no sort of dog in the fight here. I'm simply sort of relaying the law as I've read it, as I understand it. But I would liken it, for example, to school property. So it is abundantly clear in the law that you have no authority as an individual to carry a weapon, with some exceptions, but even limited exceptions for public safety officials, to carry a weapon, a firearm, onto school property. Now, you may be an individual, that's public property. It's in the care, custody, and control of the school committee or the school department, but nonetheless, that's a public entity, much like a conservation commission is a public entity. But you could be a school teacher, you could be a member of school staff, you could be a student that is employed, that is enrolled in a school that has that same restraining order taken out. And you may feel that same need to protect yourself when you're at your day-to-day job. If you're a staff member and you're there for 8 or 10 hours a day, you probably spend more time on that school premises than you may even spend in your own home. You may feel the need to protect yourself, but you have no right to provide yourself with that protection, because the law says you can't. And that you could view that as an encroachment upon your Second Amendment right, and maybe some people do, and that may be a fair critique. But that is certainly the state of the law in Massachusetts. And so I would liken this instance to that example. This is property that's within the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission. I did use a comparison to a private property owner, and the rights that a private property owner would have to restrict entry onto his or her own property by an individual carrying a firearm. But I think that the Conservation Commission has that same authority with respect to property that is within its care, custody, and control, as a matter of regulating the ownership of property, as opposed to acting pursuant to its regulatory authority as a governmental actor.
All right. So I think I understand. I understand that. I mean, I think that the regulation of guns on school property, isn't that both federal and state law, though?
Correct.
Whereas the regulation of possession of firearms on conservation land, I'm not aware of neither a state nor federal law that says that that's not permissible.
No, there is nothing specific to firearms on Conservation Commission property. The only state law that I would cite for you is the enabling legislation for the Conservation Commission, Chapter 40, Section 8C, that gives the Conservation Commission the authority to establish regulations with respect to use of property that's under its control.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Costa, for the time and energy that you've put into this. I appreciate the time that you also set aside to talk to me as well about this issue. I think for us as a community, knowing that the conservation is appointed by this board, I think this triggers a new question during that process, which is, what does the possession of a firearm have to do with the conservation of land? As a policy matter, I don't have an answer to that. I can certainly understand hunting, how that has to do with different things, but I don't understand how the possession of a firearm has anything to do with land conservation.
Mr. Pease.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say, I have a couple of things I'd like to say, and then I have a question for town council through you. Our present land use regulations have been on the books since 2011. No one's really paid any attention to them until we went to revise them. They weren't controversial, and I'm trying to say they weren't controversial until we went to revise them. We went to revise them, and our first public hearing, we got a letter from, Michael Ray Jeffries, with concerns about the fact that they regulated the possession of firearms. And until I got that letter from Michael Ray, I had never noticed that they regulated the possession of firearms. That was news to me. I thought they, prohibited hunting with firearms, not the possession. We reached out to town council, to ask, do we have the ability to do that? And we got a response, yes. And I just want to assure the board that every time we revise our regs, Attorney Costa will tell you, we reach out to him and ask for his review on everything we do to make sure that everything we are proposing, is legal and meets the test of law. That said, we've had one workshop so far. We have another workshop scheduled tomorrow night at the end of the meeting. And we're going to then have a public hearing on the 17th. And we're developing draft regulations. And at the present time, our draft regulations do not include a ban on the possession of firearms. I don't know what'll happen. Tomorrow night, we went through, I had been advocating that we take our existing regulations and revise them so that we could give, the public a track changes document so they could see, what's different about the new regulations than the old regulations. At the last workshop, a majority of the board decided they wanted to go in a different direction, and we used a set of draft regulations that was developed by Richard Birch, which is really a terrific set in that they're shorter, they're more succinct, and they have a certain internal structure, and so that we basically started from scratch on our regulations. And I think we're very close to a final draft. We're going to take and tomorrow night go over and review Attorney Costa's review. We're going to see, the people have had 2 weeks or a month to think about it on the commission. Do they have any other suggestions for final changes? And then we'll post that on our website, and for the public to view. So the public will have, and there'll be an ad in this Friday's Lunenburg Ledger advertising this public hearing, and people will be able to take and have a robust comment on it, at our hearing on the 17th. Those are my statements. My question for Attorney Costa was, in our present draft regulations, it makes a distinction between Hunting Hills and two other properties that we're proposing to allow hunting in the draft. in that it says that you don't have to go to the Board of Trustee, to the Board of Selectmen to ask for permission to discharge a firearm on Hunting Hills, because the town has already entered into an agreement, a conservation restriction agreement with the state when we purchased Hunting Hills. And is that right? You know, that people who are going to go to Hunting Hills don't need to come to the Board of Selectmen for the permission to discharge firearms because of the, town's past agreement with the state when we acquired the land.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Costa.
So Mr. Pease, I'm not clear about the answer to that question. I did see when I circulated my redlined edits and commentary on the new draft regulations, I did see your response, and I apologize for not emailing you since the weekend. But the reason I haven't emailed you is because I've had to take a closer look at it, and I haven't had the opportunity to do that because I don't think that the answer is going to be immediately clear. I did look when I got your email, and in fact, I looked at the Hunting Hills restriction even before I got your email while in the process of reviewing the new regulations. And it's not, if I recall, it's not quite as explicit as you just said it. I understand that that's how you interpret it, and I may interpret it the same way. There are a couple of sections, a couple of references within the conservation restriction that indicate that the Commonwealth, through whether it's, I can't remember whether it's Department of Fisheries and Wildlife or otherwise, has the authority to dictate, to determine uses, suggesting that that authority is to the exclusion of any authority that other regulatory bodies, including the Conservation Commission and any Board of Selectmen or Select Board, might have. It's an older form of conservation restriction. The newer forms are worded differently. This form is a number of years old. It's unclear to me whether that is simply meant to provide the Commonwealth with the opportunity to allow for uses above and beyond or different from what the express language of the conservation restriction permits. It seems to me odd that they would reserve that right to themselves even after they've gone through a painstaking effort over the course of several pages to dictate prohibited and permitted uses. And then, of course, there's the question that you ask, which is, depending upon the answer to that first question, what does that mean with regard to the authority of the Select Board pursuant to a town bylaw? Is this conservation restriction, which of course is a title instrument on record in the chain of title to the property? Does the Commonwealth have the authority to override the regulatory authority that a Board of Selectmen would have, that a town meeting would have in adopting a bylaw? And I'm not sure of the answer to that question. So
Okay.
I will look at it a bit more closely and try to get you some guidance before tomorrow night's meeting. But it may be that we've got to have some conversations with the Commonwealth, with DFW, and try to get some feedback from them as to how they've interpreted this language with past restrictions, because this is the form, as I understand it, they were using 10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago with some frequency. So I'm sure it's out there in other similar restrictions, and I'm sure that they have been asked this question before.
So I have a follow-up to this conversation. Number one, to the town manager or to the chair of the Conservation Commission, if you have that restriction in its full text format, can you forward it to the board so we can look at that, the Hunting Hill restriction? Because I'd like to read it in its entirety myself, if I may. So if anybody has access to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And then a question to you, Mr. Chair of the, Mr. Pease, as chair of the Conservation Commission. You mentioned that the current regulations were passed in 2011, but I'm interested in noting, do you happen to know, and I don't believe you were on the Conservation Commission at that time, but maybe you know, or maybe Mr. Bursch, who I believe was on there, was the prohibition against possession of firearms on conservation property added at that time, or was it even predating the 2000, before you modified them in 2011? Did it already exist in the regulatory land use policy of the Conservation Commission?
You'd have to ask Richard that.
Unfortunately, I don't remember if that was added in 2011. I would venture to guess it was, because the 2011 update was rather substantial from what we had prior to that for a land use policy.
I'm just interested in how long it was on the books before anybody took any notice at all. Just more of a historical reference than anything else, so. Anybody
Yeah,
have any?
I
Okay.
will add that I honestly don't remember that part of the discussion when we did approve them in 2011. I have a different recollection of what was approved, and unfortunately never really followed up with reading them after I became chair in 2014. I know one of the commissioners that was the lead on it did state that she had drawn them up so that they were more in line with other towns that were nearby to us. But in research, there is no abutting town or city to Lunenburg that has anything close to a moratorium on firearms discharge, or even the possession of firearms. All of the surrounding towns do allow both the discharge without permission and the possession of.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there's a way, Madam Town Manager, to look historically back. I mean, do we have records of past Conservation Commission land use policies? Just, I would love to know, even insofar as just 10 years prior, in 2000, was it in there? There's got to be a way for us to know what was there, unless we burn everything that existed before when we pass new things. I'm hoping we don't do that, but that's number one. Number two, I just want to add, and then I'll get to you, Ms. Adams, but one of the things I want to add is that, we're talking about it like this is a binary choice, like either you allow it or you don't allow it. You can allow it with exemptions. So you can say you can't carry, but if you're licensed and you have a concealed weapon, you could do it. I mean, there's different other ways to do this as well. I mean, I'm not promoting one or the other, but it's not just, oh, you allow it or no, you don't allow it. There's other ways in between. Ms. Adams.
Just have a question, and it relates more to probably the current regulations than to proposed changes. Is whenever there is a rule, my mind goes to who's the regulatory authority over it. So for example, right now, if the regulations say there can be no firearm, is that something that's in public safety's jurisdiction or the conservation agents? And so when we have these rules applied to the land, who would carry out the authority over it? If somebody were
Enforcement?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. Who is the current enforcement authority over the current regulations?
Well, the current regulations say violations should be reported to the conservation agent and to the police. And the current regulations say there could be a maximum fine, I think, of $20.
I think the proposed ones actually go so far as to indicate that that's who the enforcement authority is. Is that correct? Did I read that in the last version?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Anybody else have anything to say on this subject?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Bursch, and then we'll get to Mr. Dwyer.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my hand.
That's okay.
Just to answer Katie's question, the enforcement is listed under the current regulations. Violations shall be punished by a fine of up to $100. Violations of these rules and regulations may be administered by the Lunenburg Conservation Commission or its agents, including the Lunenburg Police and Fire Departments.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Under what, 4021?
40, under our regulation 48, section C, under our authority to generate the regulations.
Yeah, we should hear from Adam on this. I don't know where that comes from. How you can find somebody without statutory authority.
Well, we can find them under our statutory authority at chapter 40, section 8C. Does give us the right to fine violators of our regulations up to $100
Right, gives you the,
violation.
Mr. Costa, do you have a response to that?
I do, Mr. Chairman. So, so this is an example again of the fact that the Conservation Commission is sort of in a bit of a league of its own, that in the school department or the school committee, and that there is specific legislation that addresses its authority, you know, within its appropriate realm, and specifically with regard to property that is placed in its care, custody, and control. So, what you just heard is correct, that in the enabling legislation, chapter 40, section 8C, there is an express provision that allows the Conservation Commission to enforce, and to enforce by way of a fine. I would agree with the comment or the reference just made by Member Marino regarding non-criminal disposition, because in the absence of any explicit statutory authority, that's sort of the go-to, and certainly nothing would prohibit the Conservation Commission from also allowing, as an alternative means of enforcement, a non-criminal disposition process, which you probably know as a ticketing process. That could be done, but in this instance, the latest version of the regulations that I've reviewed doesn't include, if I recall correctly, doesn't include any reference to section 21D, that non-criminal disposition process. It simply references the up to $100 fine that is permitted pursuant to chapter 40, section 8C.
so what is the vehicle by which they would, in other words, enforce the fine? How would they do that if it's not a ticket?
Superior court action.
Right. I've been through this before. This is rhetoric for me. So Hickory Hills created a bunch of rules and wanted the police to enforce them. And it came down to us telling them, we can't enforce them. It's the Superior Court has to enforce them. So we're in the same situation. I just wanted to point that out. So, you know.
You are correct. You are correct.
Mr. Dwyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to chime in with my opinion. It sounds, based on listening to the discussion, that the Conservation Commission is on track to, you know, make some reasonable adjustments to their policies or their regulations, and I'm encouraged to see what their final product is, to eliminate some of the areas that could, as Member Marino alluded to, cause us some legal headaches down the road. And so I'm encouraged and I support that, and I'll be following closely the developments as they move forward.
Thank you. I will say that, you know, the fact that you can't ticket them, but you can, you know, you have to have other means of enforcement doesn't really present a compelling case not to put it in. I mean, we have that you can't discharge it. Nobody's questioning whether you should be able to discharge a firearm, but if somebody does it, it's the same thing. I mean, it's not a criminal offense unless you're within 500 feet of a house or something, but you would be faced with the same thing. Do you therefore say, okay, well, you know what, we shouldn't prohibit discharging a weapon then either? So, I mean, there get to be reasonableness that what you're trying to prevent and what most law-abiding citizens would follow. You know, you can't look at what people might break because the enforcement is too difficult. I mean, it's part of the conversation, but it's not the only part of the conversation.
Well,
Mr. Pease.
So I guess I'd like some clarification from Attorney Costa through you. You know, the biggest problem we usually have on conservation land is people driving ATVs over them. And in the past, you know, we've reached out to the police department for help with that. And they've always been very helpful, you know, and we can give them, you know, something concrete to go on. Am I hearing that they shouldn't be helping us? I guess I'm looking for some clarification here.
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes.
So, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be helping you. I think the point that was made was that, and I don't want to speak for anybody else on the board, was that it can become difficult or challenging for the police department or its officers to enforce the authority under the statute we've been referencing, Chapter 48, Section 8C, is authority that's vested in the Conservation Commission. As a general rule of municipal governance, the commission could identify an agent to act on its behalf, and if the police department were comfortable acting as that agent, I would be comfortable defending that action in court. But the finer point that I think is being made is, well, the police officers, the department may not be so willing to assist if it's simply going to have violators sort of thumb their nose at the police department on the basis that we're not going to do this. You can go ahead and slap us with a fine, but you can't use the non-criminal disposition process. And so the next step for you as a community, maybe not the police department, but ultimately the Conservation Commission, is going to be to bring an action in Superior Court. We know what that entails. We know how costly that can be. We know you're likely not to do it. And so we're going to take that knowledge, and armed with that knowledge, we're simply going to disobey the rules, the regulations, and know that you're not likely to follow through with enforcement of those regulations. I think that's the concern that's being raised. I don't think there's anything that says you couldn't incorporate within your regulations a reference to the non-criminal disposition statute. But I do think that statute indicates that it's only enforceable in instances where that's prescribed by bylaw. And this wouldn't be a bylaw prescription. This would be a prescription by way of a regulation adopted by statute. So, I have some concern about that potentially being challenged in the future as well.
I
But it
found
could-
out things tonight that I didn't want to know.
But it could be added, right? I mean, we could, obviously bylaw could be amended to allow that authority. Correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, hold on, we'll come back. Go ahead, Ms. Marino. It's on the same subject.
It's same subject, and I guess I just want to repeat what Attorney Costa said, that I want to clarify that from a police standpoint, it is a challenging thing to try to enforce rules. And obviously we would, or the police, I'm sure, would act as your agent. However, going back to what you said, Mr. Chairman, I think the best remedy here is to think about a bylaw to regulate it. And I go back to that because it's a good example, that Carlisle example. It's not that it's trying to stop people from hunting and so forth. It's just it's a well-written regulation. And it takes the onus off, I think, the Conservation Committee in this case, although their version of their regulations is obviously going to become important going forward as well. And I don't want to interfere with that as well. I'm just making suggestions. So, thank you.
Well, I think that the Conservation Commission should look at that as a reference to that. If you have that and they can send it to them, Mr. Marino, that would be helpful.
I'll do that.
Mr. Jeffries.
Yeah, briefly here, I just want to thank Mr. Pease and Mr. Birch for looking into this concern. Certainly, I'm not aware of anyone clamoring at the gates to hunt on town property. You guys may be, but I'm not aware of that. And I really don't have an opinion, strong opinion anymore on that topic. I perceived an infringement upon rights, and I'm very thankful of this process that we've gone through, Mr. Chair, for us with having town council here, and then also with the members of the Conservation Commission being here. I know this has been lengthy, but certainly I do appreciate the energy that's been put into this and the direction that the Conservation Commission is going in to consider to regulate the hunting and not so much the possession of firearms. So thank you very much for all you guys' hard work on this topic.
I will echo that, and I think, Mr. Jeffries, you're ready to run this meeting next week when I'm on vacation, so that was very well said, so that was perfect timing. But I agree, I appreciate everybody's time. This was an excellent, a very good conversation, And I think these kind of discussions are helpful for everybody to, as we navigate through, very unclear waters with overlapping jurisdictions and state laws and federal laws and local laws, et cetera. So thanks everybody for bringing it up and everybody for their patience in pursuing this discussion. Mr. Chair, Mr. Pease, if you could also, in preparation, after your meeting tomorrow, whatever is going to be discussed as far as the last version of the outlined land use policy that your commission comes up with, if you could send that to the board and make sure I guess it actually gets on I would request, I can only request that you put it on the town website under the Conservation Commission in preparation of your public hearing, so people can see and be prepared what you're going to be discussing.
We've already sent an ad into the Lunenburg Ledger, because, as you know, the publication deadline is, I think it's either today or tomorrow, stating that the land use regs will be on the Conservation Commission website. And that is fully our intention, barring some technological glitch, that they should be put up there sometime, I would hope on Thursday.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. And I'm sorry for the redundant request. I didn't know that was already going to be in there. So thank you. Excellent. All right. That concludes our open session agenda for this evening. I will reiterate what has already been said twice, that this Thursday, well, first of all, the Conservation Commission is tomorrow on Zoom. So if people want to follow this, the chair of the commission said that this topic will be up at the end of their meeting. So if people are interested, what time is your meeting? At 6:30?
The meeting starts at 7. I think we have something like 5 public hearings, 2 appointments. I would note it's a workshop. There won't be any public input. When we're discussing the regs, it's an opportunity for the commission to discuss it among themselves. The opportunity for the public's input will be at the public hearing on the 17th.
Appreciate it. But people can listen in.
But
And then,
they
of
can
course,
certainly listen in.
and on February 4th, this Thursday, is the Greenleaf Botanical Community Outreach, again, for the adult use cannabis retail store that's proposed on Mass Ave. And that's, again, a Zoom meeting. All the info has been published in the Ledger, and it's also on the town website, so you can join that on Thursday. Our next meeting is next Tuesday. I will be away, and Mr. Jeffries will be chairing that meeting. And then we have a meeting on the 16th. It's going to be a workshop on appointments. So to the board members who have not submitted already an appointment/reappointment process that we want to review, please make sure that it gets to me so we can distribute it before that meeting.
You get mine, Tom?
I did.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any public comment from the public? Again, look for any hands up. Hearing none. Any public comment from the board? Ms. Adams. Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I think mine's a little bit more of a question, and I don't know if the town manager has the answer. It's been a series now of weeks where this isn't going out live on cable. And I think I've missed, what is the glitch?
Hold on. It was in her report, but I'm going to unmute it and she can repeat it. Yep.
Like the chairman said, in my report, the cable manager, they've been looking into the issue and they believe it's with the Castus server and not an internet issue. But I will relay again for tonight's meeting. And I know they're working on it as we speak. I know the cable manager had to go to the town hall. So to try to work out the issue.
I know in these strange times, people probably rely on their cable broadcasts for entertainment, and week after week we've disappointed. So,
well, it's frustrating that it's not live, and then and then people can't see it, and you'd be surprised. I'm always surprised at how many people do say they see it.
Yeah, they
Uh,
probably have their popcorn popped and they're ready to go and.
Eric,
you-
Cable asked.
I think somebody wants to, here's somebody right from Lunenburg Public Access. Hold on a
Thank
second.
you.
Good evening.
Hi, yeah, it is not a problem with the internet at all. It is a problem with the server that we are sending all the stream codes to. What that does is it takes the stream codes and just converts them into the same signal that can be broadcast out on TV. That has been, ever since I've been here, which has been a year and a half, it's been getting progressively slower. So I don't know if there's a hardware update or something that needs to be done, but it's our intention to make sure that everybody can see this and to promote this. It's very frustrating when we can't promote these kind of meetings. So I know that Joe was talking with the people that she needs to talk to, which I don't know who they are, but she was talking to them, and we're really working very hard to try to fix this because we want to promote it as well, because it's people should be able to be involved. So
Okay,
I appreciate that. I appreciate the look behind the camera too, by the way. So I feel like this is late night and now we're talking to the camera people in the control room. So that's fun. Ms. Adams.
yeah, and just as a follow-up to that, I do worry about meeting accessibility. Occasionally we get a public commenter via the phone or something that may be accessing the meeting through TV where people can't come in person to our meetings. And we've all started to adapt to that. Then of course there is logging into Zoom as a form of accessibility, but I feel like we're really limiting the public's ability to interact with us live. And although it's great, we can put these on YouTube, maybe somebody can catch it live on Facebook or something. The intent of these meetings is public participation. And I think we've got to take a close look at the fact week after week after week, if we're missing sort of a live component. I know I was talking to somebody recently who, would show up at the end of the meetings live. They'd watch them from home, hop in their car, come to the meeting for a public comment. Well, the same thing is if somebody's watching live at home, they can call in or try to get in touch with us when it's still relevant. So I definitely feel like there's more to it than just, as I made the joke of enjoying it and making the popcorn, but participation becomes more and more limited the less access people have to the actual meeting.
So when we actually can connect, our goal is to co-stream it on Facebook as well. And one thing that you might want to give consideration to is somebody on your end that is watching the Facebook feed, because that's where they'll be answering questions. I don't know if you've thought about that or not, but that would be a goal that I would certainly work towards, because I'm in total agreement with you. Accessibility is key, and if somebody can write make a public comment through Facebook as well that could be heard at the meeting, I think that's all the better. And so, but you'd need somebody on your end to facilitate that, to bring that conversation into your meeting. So
Understood. Well, we have to get the live. I appreciate the input. I think we have to get the live feedback up. I completely agree with Ms. Adams. It's really detrimental to the whole process not having that up. Not that it's anybody in the control room. If we're paying for this service, I hope that company is looking to replace it or remedy it. As far as the Facebook live monitoring, let me tell you, I'm on its face, I'm not against it. But as a chair hosting this meeting, there's a lot going on. I got people coming in, I have people muting, and because we don't want Zoom bombing, we don't want people unmuting. So there's a lot going on, and I think we'd have to give another person the monitoring charge. We'd almost need like a moderator, which wouldn't be bad, but then we'd have to pay them, and then that's a budgetary problem, and then there's a whole bunch.
You already pay me, so I'd be happy to do it at any time if you'd like that. But obviously, getting the broadcast out is paramount. So we'll work on that and get back to you as soon as we have some information.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Rich, you had your hand up. Did you want to speak, or was that an accident?
Well, it was a bit of an accident, but Katie had mentioned she could not find her raise hand,
Oh,
and I couldn't either. And if you look at the bottom tray, I have a new button that says reactions. Then if you click reactions, you get the little raised hand symbol.
oh, thank you. Yep, that is different. There it
So I
is.
don't know if it's an update or so.
It's a
Thank you.
select board meeting. It's a conservation commission meeting. It's a tech support meeting. Unbelievable. This is everything that people, I wish this was live now just for that. That was worth the whole price of this show. It's just making sure people know where the raise hand button is. So,
There we go.
all right, is there one last chance? Anybody else from the board? Okay, we are going to go into executive session, not to return to open Zoom meeting, if that's even a thing. We're gonna have a motion to enter into executive session to adjourn after exiting executive session for the following two reasons. One, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. This is regarding 192 Townsend Harbor Road. And reason number two, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares. This is regarding the Municipal Employees Union, the Fire Union, and the DPW Union. So do I have a motion to do this executive session?
I would make a motion, we go into the red executive sessions.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
There's a roll call as all votes are Ms. Adams,
Aye.
Mr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries,
Aye.
and an aye from myself. Good night, everyone. We will see you next Tuesday. And the rest of you, we will drop off this meeting and join the executive session Zoom. Thank you.
Thanks.